How's everything?
Good, good. Um, we're still in the pandemic here. You guys, I know everything's good over there, but here we're still we're still living it.
I mean, yeah, things are getting better here, and hopefully we can get this done. But there isn't a second wave.
That's great. That's awesome.
Perfect. We're also live on YouTube and as well as Zoom. I'd like to start with thanking you, Amjad, for joining us today. And thank everybody as well for joining the webinar. My name is Ahmad Nazzal. I work as an analyst with AB Accelerator within our bank. AB Accelerator is a corporate accelerator that focuses on investing and partnering with fintech startups globally. To learn more about the accelerator, I'll be adding our website to the chat. Feel free to visit and reach out to us. In today's webinar, we have a very special speaker, Amjad Masad, the CEO and founder of Replit, which is a San Francisco-based company that provides an online programming environment that makes coding more fun and approachable by allowing users to write code using a browser. Replit is backed by notable investors such as Andreessen Horowitz and Y Combinator. Amjad is a Jordanian entrepreneur. He previously worked at Yahoo, Facebook, and Code Academy. Amjad started coding at the age of 12, and he's a computer science graduate from Princess Sumaya University, or PSUT, in Amman. Amjad, I'd like to thank you again for joining us today. I will leave you now to lead the discussion, in terms of your entrepreneurial journey from Jordan all the way to Silicon Valley. And perhaps you can start by telling us about your university days at PSUT and how it influenced you today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be here. I guess I can start with going to university. Maybe in high school is better because in high school was when I started my first software business, and it was very simple. I was going to playing video games, LAN video games. Many maybe of your audience would remember the days in Jordan when everyone was going to these gaming cafes. We're going to play Counter-Strike and Red Alert and these things, and it was becoming very, very popular. One of the things that I noticed, kind of being someone who's interested in software, is that there's a lot of manual processes that happens at these gaming cafes. You go in and you pay, I think it was 2 JDs or JD or something like that, for an hour. You pay 2 JDs, they give you a computer, you sit down, you play for an hour. Now, maybe after your hour is up, he's written, the guy on the front desk has written your name down on your computer, and he has to check every hour whose time is up, and he'll have to go and tap you on your shoulder and ask you, do you want to add more time or do you want to leave? And I thought that process was incredibly manual. And here we are surrounded by computers, and the computers could do a lot of the work. And of course, he could forget, and I couldn't have an account where I can say pay 20 GDs and keep a credit with them. And so I started designing the software for that. And as far as I can remember, it was the first software to do sort of gaming / internet cafe management software. And I was 15 years old. I was 14 when I started working on it. It took me a year to finish it. And when I was 15, I went around and started selling it to different gaming cafes, and started making a lot of money. And the way we, especially for a 15-year-old kid, and the way we sold it is we sold it via contract. We would tell the stores is that not only we will make the software for you, but we'll also maintain the computers and everything like that. At some point, it got a little bit too much work for me, so I started hiring my friends, and it kind of became a business. And it was still a lot of work for someone in high school. Sometimes I would miss school to work on the project. I would I would stay home or come home early or something like that to work on the project. So that was kind of my first experience with making commercial software. Later on, people started copying the software. There was excuse me, there was software available on the internet for free, and so that business didn't go anywhere. When I went to college, I had this weird vision, and I think a lot of people have it today, that AI is getting so advanced that software programming will be something that the AI will do. And so I thought, okay, if AIs um, will be doing the programming for us, which of course turned out to be not the case, what is the skill that you would need to have a job in the upcoming century? Um, and so I decided to go into computer engineering in Sumaya. And also, part of the reason why I didn't go into software at first is because to be an engineer in Jordan, as you know, there is I don't know if now computer science is called engineering, but they wouldn't let you in the نقابة. They wouldn't let you in the union if you are a software engineer. And so you had to be a real computer engineer. And so there was some prestige behind being a computer engineer. And of course, my father loved that because everyone in the family is an engineer. And so we went into computer engineering, and it was uh, it was kind of I didn't really enjoy it as much as software, and slowly I drifted back to going back to software, and eventually a year or two in I switched to software, and this idea of like AI kind of writing all software just became incredibly silly at the time, because it just felt like programming is a lot harder than I thought. Because when you're young and you've accomplished a bit, you just feel cocky, and then you get humbled immediately by how complex software could be. So I went back into software, and I think one of the things that I noticed, and I worked the whole time. I didn't stop working. I had a job doing IT at first, just going around and installing software, managing software. And then later on, I got a job at what people know now is Kharabish. At the time, Kharabish was only one part of it. They had a bigger company, uh, and it had 5 or 6 sub companies. They were like 4 or 5 entrepreneurs, well-known Jordanian entrepreneurs, great guys, and they were starting all these different companies. So they wanted to start a startup, uh, and they wanted to build spreadsheet software to manage cash flows for startups, and they wanted to build it on the web. And at the time, 2008, 2009, it was building something complex on the web was not as easy. Most people were building Flash apps for the web. The idea of building HTML5 app was something that's very challenging. But I loved the challenge, so I joined the startup. It was 2 or 3 of us, and I was working on that. At the same time, I was taking my computer science classes, and I would wake up, go to university. At university, we would go to a computer science class. Say we'd want to learn object-oriented programming in Java. And the first thing that happens is you'd want to install the development environment. So Java, any programming language you want to code in, the first step is to install what's called an IDE, which is the thing that allows you to write the code. But in addition to the IDE, you have to install the packages, the software packages that allow you to do certain things. In addition to packages, sometimes you have to manage the version of the compiler or interpreter. And so this whole thing is called setting up the development environment, and it wasn't an easy thing. Now, most people, I didn't have a laptops. Laptops were a lot more expensive back then. And most people in my class didn't have a laptop. So we had to do this almost on a daily basis. We'd have to go into the computer lab, and hopefully they have some of the software installed. If not, we'd have to download the software gigabytes from the internet and install it. And that was very cumbersome. And on top of that, I'd go to work after university. I would go to work at the startup, and it, over there, well, say I want to solve some homework, I'd have to do the same steps again. Now I want to go home, and I want to write some code, solve some homework, and I have to do the same steps again. And it just was wasting so much time, so much effort. It was wasting so much bandwidth, so much disk space, and it just felt to me like it was a big hindrance to writing code. Writing code should be very easy. Now, at the time, 2009, um, Google had started coming out with these apps. They had come out with Gmail 2008, which was a big hit. I think Google Docs came out in 2009, 2010. And you had a feeling of, okay, wow, like this new suite of software will all live in the cloud, will all live in the browser, and it will be, we were transitioning from this place of, you have this PC at home to a place where you're interacting with multiple devices. iPad had just come out, and tablets and phones were getting smarter, and the computer was getting more portable. And so the idea of everything kind of being in the cloud and being accessible no matter where you are, from what device you are, just felt like it was going to be the future. Now, of course, we're still in that transition. Like not everything is there yet. It's taking a while, especially in the enterprise. It's taking them a while. But cloud computing is the big shift that started happening then. And I started thinking about, what does it mean for programming and what does it mean for education? And as an engineer, as a hacker, I like to think the best thing to do, there's a famous computer scientist that says the best way to invent the future, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And the best way to explore a certain aspect is to try to build something there. So we try to build a very simple interpreter. At first, it was me, and I built a very simple JavaScript interpreter on a web page, and I started using it as if I would want to use Replit today, which is I would code on my phone. I had a Symbian phone. I would open the web page, code on my phone. I would go to the office, code on the office. I would go, and I was using this very simple prototype. I felt like there was something very, very special there. Now, going from the prototype to something working took us almost 2 years. And so I asked my friend who was top of our class back then, Max Shawabke, I asked him to help me with this. And at the time, honestly, he was a better programmer than me. So it was very, very important for me to ask people he was a better low-level programmer. And we needed a lot of compiler engineering and low-level engineering. And then I asked my colleague at the time, who's now my wife, to also help us with the design. And she was help us with design. And I can go into more details if you'd want, but I'll pause there. What we did is we worked on this application on and off for 2 years, and we released it in 2011. In 2011, we released the first version of Replit. It was called JS REPL at the time. It wasn't even called Replit. And it had a groundbreaking technology, and that had a big hit all over the internet, Hacker News, Reddit, Slashdot. Everyone saw something very, very special in it. And all the industry specialists thought that this was a groundbreaking technology. The inventor of JavaScript blogged about it. And it was a very weird and unique experience because Here we are, three kids from Jordan, able to create a technology that is groundbreaking on the world class. So I'll stop there and happy to go into any more details.
So I'd like to ask you so about your transition into Code Academy. So tell us about your story with Code Academy and how you did this transition from Yahoo to Code Academy, and you moved to the US.
Yeah. So after we had this initial big success, there was still a lot of work to be done. We proved an idea, we proved the technology, and we had to repurpose the technology for more features and more applications. It was very simple for the kind of application it is, and it was hard for me to see how it could turn into a business as it is. Um, it's now I see it more clearly, but at the time it seemed like we need to apply it to some focused vertical like education. Um, and I started pitching this idea. Uh, Max at the time had decided to go back to Google because he interned there and he got a job. Nobody can blame him if you get a internship from Google. Everyone at Sumaya, by the way, was trying to get into Google. It was the height of kind of the Google hype, and they were recruiting in a university, and it was very big. So he got a job, and you can't blame him. He went there. Um, and I decided to try to make it into a startup. Now I had already gotten a job at Yahoo, um, and the Yahoo job was interesting. It was fun. I've I was able to meet so many talented people in Jordan, doing programming and software engineering, and I learned quite a bit there. But Yahoo, the company, so they acquired Maktub. In Yahoo, the company was obviously in decline. We had a crazy CEO. When you heard her talk, I forgot her name, but at the time, that was before Marissa. When you heard her talk, you could see that this person does not understand technology. I don't know where they got her from. The company viewed software engineers as a cost and not an asset. They didn't view themselves, they had this internal idea that Yahoo was a media company. They were kept saying, we're a media company, we're about creating new media properties, we should not be investing in infrastructure and technology. So it was a very strange place to be. And I wasn't, I was checked out because it just didn't seem like a place you could grow and become a better engineer. Although there were still some good engineers there, but people were leaving very quickly. So I had the day job, but on the weekends and at nights, I continued working on the project and I started pitching it. So the first, the VC landscape in 2011 is very, very different than it is right now in Jordan. Um, at the time, you could count the VCs on one hand. And because I had worked with the guys from Harapish, I was interested in seeing if we can partner together and make this as a startup in their incubator. And they were very interested at first, but then it's sort of, you know how it is, it kind of died down, the interest. And I pitched a few investors here and there, and the feedback that I got from a lot of investors in Jordan is, this seems like a new technology. We'd rather not invest in new technologies. We'd rather copy and repurpose Western technology to work in Jordan, which is, again, I don't think it's a bad strategy. But as we've seen with Kareem and with all the recent successes in the region, it's mostly copying technology that already worked in the West. It's a reasonable business strategy, but I find it to be boring technological strategy, right? I want to build new things. I want to build, I want to push the state of the art. And I think the people that we have in Jordan and the minds are able to invent and are able to create. And we're not China. We shouldn't be copying. We should be inventing and creating. So that was a big disagreement with some of the investors there. Uh, Code Academy around the same time was going through Y Combinator, which is the most prestigious startup incubator and accelerator here in Silicon Valley. And the two founders, before their demo day, 2 weeks before their demo day, they were doing a lot of pivoting. And the last pivot they did was this idea of interactive coding in the browser, teaching coding in the browser. And they used, so at the time we had open sourced all our technology, and they used our technology to build the initial version of their site. And I got an email. Actually, I saw it on Hacker News, where I discover a lot of the new startups, and I was blown away that they were using our software. So we started talking, and then I got an email from them saying just potentially looking at collaborating, and we started talking about that. And I sort of shut down the conversation pretty quickly because I was adamant about starting our own startup, but I agreed to doing some contracting for them. So I started doing some contracting. I built more languages into Code Academy, and I helped them with a lot of things. And then one day the CEO emails me and says, like, I want to come visit you in Jordan. And I was like, okay, this is strange, but you're welcome. Ahla wa sahla. And so he comes to Jordan, and as good Jordanian, I just show him around. I took him to the Dead Sea. I took him to places. You fed him some mensef. Got some argile going, and we just had fun for 3 or 4 days. We talked about the future. We talked about where the world is headed. We talked about all that stuff, but I avoided talking about joining them because I didn't want to join them. I just wanted to build my own thing. So he gave me an offer just the night before he left, and the offer I thought was not great. I thought that I have enough value to them, and I wanted some a seat at the table more than the equity or the compensation. I wanted to be considered one of the founding members of the team. And we had we didn't agree. He upped the offer. We still didn't agree. He went to the hotel. He slept. In the morning, I was driving him back to the US, and we hadn't agreed. So I was just thinking, we made the connection. It was fun. Let's part ways. Just outside the airport in the car, he gave me an offer. He scratched with his pen the numbers in the offer, and he gave me a meaningful offer that I thought I'd be able to accept. So I accepted the offer just outside the airport. I started working for them full time around November 2011. Applied for an O1 visa. O1 is the Alien of Extraordinary Ability. We had gotten some press. We had gotten some recognition. So it was fairly straightforward to get the O1. I got the O1, and I moved to United States to New York around February 2012. Moved there with very little money. I had saved some money from Yahoo, and with very little knowledge about New York, and it was and moving with a startup that was very small and very early, and it was a very interesting experience because they not everything was was set up correctly. Not everything. I didn't have a place to stay, so I had to stay in the office for a little bit. It was kind of a challenging experience just to get in the groove of New York. But it's also a very fun experience, and I cherish that.
Great. I mean, I'd love to ask you on in terms of what really influenced you to start Replit after your position at Facebook. What were you thinking when you started to take the risk of leaving your job and then starting your own thing?
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. Code Academy, as I mentioned, was was um, was a small company with founders that weren't very experienced, and they did a great job still, but at one point we sort of diverged in how we think about the startup. One thing about me is that I'm driven by technology. There are a lot of business people that are driven by creating businesses and competing in the market um, and winning and making a lot of money. Uh, for me, it's always around two things. It's always around users and what value they're getting out of it, and just the impact we have on the world. And the other thing is technology and how are we inventing new things? Are we pushing the envelope? Um, are we inventing the future? And this is very important for me because um, I feel like there's so much we need to do as humans, as people, to create the world that we want to live in. The sort of the um, we're if you look at the world, we're in a big transitionary um, area from the industrial revolution to the information age. So there's a lot of things that need to change and be invented around software and computers and technology in general, to be able to make that shift correctly, because I think we're still in this awkward place. And some things are accelerating now with COVID and all that. A lot of things are moving online, but I just feel like we're in a time in history where we need to do a lot of invention and a lot of work to create the future, to create a good future. And the Code Academy was set on a path. It was doing education, and it was impactful. It was a growing business, but I just didn't feel like I was inventing anymore. So it was also very tiring. Like the working at startups, as you might know, is very tiring. And if you don't feel like you are getting rewarded, whether monetary or just by the feeling of accomplishment, then it's just like not the place to be, right? So when I started looking at other opportunities, um, Facebook was attractive to me. Facebook was a reasonably large company. It was obvious that it was going to be a very large company. At the time, it was like 5,000 people, which is almost like a tenth of what it is now. It's like 50 or 60,000 people. So it was still kind of manageable size. It wasn't like a huge corporation. It was obvious that you could have a healthy lifestyle there. You don't have to kill yourself working. And I was really attracted to what they were doing at the time with internet.org and their work around mobile. So Facebook in 2011, 2012 had gone through a big shift from being desktop first to being mobile first. And as part of that, they also unlocked a big part of the market that was coming online, specifically in places like India and Africa, where most people are getting a tablet or a phone as their first computer, as opposed to a desktop, like most people in the West and the Middle East. And that to me was very interesting because, like I said, this is one of the things that I feel like we're in the middle of big shift, and mobile is one of those big shifts. So I wanted to be part of that. So I joined Facebook, and I was really excited about working on Android, and I knew they were investing not only in Android Facebook app, which to me was like I didn't care too much about it, but what I cared about was Android as a technology and as a platform. So I know they were investing in that, and I joined. And at first I started working on it, and I realized that it was very it wasn't a very good developer experience. Like, if this is one of the next platforms that will allow people more access to computing and the internet, I thought that this was an inadequate way to make software for it. And so I looked around in the company, and I found a team who was making React at the time, React.js, which is now one of the biggest JavaScript frameworks to making apps in the world. They also had a very experimental group that was working on mobile development framework, and I lobbied very hard to try to join that team, and then joined that team. While working on that team, I was one of the founding members of it, and I built the developer tool chain to build mobile apps. And if you think about, which became React Native, and if you think about what React Native is kind of like what Replit is, but specifically for mobile apps. Like, what Replit is a pre-set up environment that gives you a very tight feedback loop between coding and seeing the output of your code. And what React Native did was make it very easy to code application live. And so I worked on that for a few years. And then in 2015, Haya and I, my wife and now co-founder, we're always like looking, because she's a designer, I'm an engineer, we're always looking to work on side projects. And I started getting bored from the big company. We released React Native, it was growing. I was looking for the next thing I wanted to do. And we looked around, and we looked at what happened to the online coding space. And what we found is that there's been a lot of progress. Codecademy, of course, continued to grow. And there was Cloud9, which was acquired by Amazon. Now it's an AWS product. Cloud9 was very heavy duty IDE that made it possible to code in the browser. And we found, on the other hand, very small experimental things, kind of how Replit used to be. So our vision for kind of the company that we wanted to build was building something in the middle that harmonizes this idea of a playground that is like Codecademy, a playground where you learn, and a real development experience. Can you build something that blurs the distinction between doing and learning? Like, when you buy a new car, when you're learning to drive, you don't buy a car for learning and then throw it away and then buy another car to actually drive. Maybe a bicycle is a better analogy. On a bicycle, you put training wheels, and then you remove the training wheels once you learn. And so we wanted more to do something like, something with built-in training wheels that can be removed, and then you can use it for your job or for real work. And we started working on that. 2016, I left Facebook, and we started Replit as a company. We had already some users, and we had already started seeing some growth after we invested some more into it. And we invested some money in the company ourselves, and we spent 2 or 3 months working on it as a kind of bootstrapped company. But then we got some funding from Bloomberg Beta. I made the connection with the Bloomberg Beta investors when I was at Codecademy, because they were investors in Codecademy. We re-engaged them then, and they invested in Replit, and that was the start of Replit. And the first market we went after was the education market, because that seemed the most obvious one. And then more recently, we've been talking to developers. We're, in terms of our vision of this environment that kind of blurs the distinction between learning and building, we're almost there. It's a place where a lot of kids start their learning journey, a lot of young developers, and a lot of people are building stuff in it. A lot of the stuff that are getting built is sort of more simpler projects, like bots, like small applications, that sort of thing. But we're going to continue developing it and continue making it more powerful until it can actually do anything that any other IDE will do.
So we have a question here from one of our attendees. It's essentially is, what are the main validation points that kept you going and kept you convinced and proceeding and building and bootstrapping your idea? So essentially, what kind of customer validation would you conduct to really validate the product market fit for your product?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We did some surveys early on, and one of the things that we tested, because we're not like we did not know about Net Promoter Score and all these things, but we did a similar survey, and we had very strong numbers in terms of user experience, in terms of how useful this thing is, and the email thank you letters that we would get from people. It just felt like this is something that people really, really want, and people asking for features. And Haya did this thing where we put out a survey and we collected all the things that people want, and then we put them on the wall and we cluster them based on the category of what they might want. And a lot of the features that people want till today validated our vision, validated that this is a place that they want to not only learn, but also build. So that was a huge validation. That the growth is always good validation. Like in the first year, we grew something like 4x or something like that, went from 100,000 to like 400,000 monthly users. And we continue to grow at an exponential rate. So exponential growth generally means you have something very, very, very good. That's more like a consumer mindset. So we've taken a more consumer mindset to developing our application, just because we come from a more consumer mindset software. Like my experience at Facebook, my experience even at Code Academy was never enterprise software. So I think for enterprise, you might want to take a different approach. You might want to take more of a sales approach. But even now, like the way Silicon Valley has been operating is that even enterprise software has become more of a consumer software play, at least in the start. So if you look at Slack was a very bottoms up, mostly kind of developers and entrepreneurs adopting it at their companies. And once you hit certain like market saturation or certain like number of users, the word of mouth around your product becomes very, very strong, that it opens doors for you even on the enterprise side. And so that's the strategy that we've taken to build and validate our startup.
So another question we have from our attendees is, how do you set up a minimum viable product, and how do you size the MVP in your opinion?
What was the first one? How do I set up a what?
So how do you set up a minimum viable product, and how do you size the MVP?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a very good question. It's kind of more of an art than a science, I would say. Think about the user experience. Think about the happy path, right? What is the user experience going to be to get the most value out of a product? So, okay, so say you want to build an online coding environment. The minimum viable product is the minimum viable product is for me to type in some code, run it, and see the output. Just the simplest thing, right? And so a text box, a run, and output pane. That seems the simplest thing, and you can build that and get feedback early. What are the features that you're just speculating about? Now, when you set out to build a new product, you have a very concrete use case you're going after, but you also have all the stuff around it that is just theoretically would make it nice. Remove all the theoretical stuff, just make the concrete thing work and get something out there and get feedback. Now, what's the risk of getting something too early? Is that it's not useful. Okay, so what? You can go back and build something that's more useful. What's the risk of getting something too complete or complete and has a lot of features that nobody wants? The risk is that you're going to spend a lot more time and you're going to build something that nobody wants anyways. And so it's much easier to do the MVP first and get feedback.
So in terms of funding, I mean, how did notable investors like Paul Graham, Y Combinator, Anderson Horowitz discover Replit, and what tips would you give to founders in terms of raising funding and lessons learned based on your experience, basically?
Yeah, I would say we applied to Y Combinator maybe 4 times. We are big fans of Paul Graham and Y Combinator and the way they think about startups. We got rejected a lot of times. And I think part of the reason we got rejected is because Replit, the way we talk about it is like more structured like an R&D project a lot of the time. Although we now have very good product market fit, we have millions of users. I think the way we approach building things is different than a lot of other startups is. We don't talk a lot about like the market and the opportunity, things that investors want to hear. So maybe someone else could do a better job. Now I'm a lot better at it than I used to be, but as an engineer and a designer, we didn't have a business person on the team to help us do that. But what we're good at is vision and technology. And what we did is I wrote a blog and I published a blog on Hacker News and different parts of the web, and people start sharing it. And I talked about how we build our startup and talked about the technological challenges. And I think Paul found it by going to one of our blogs. I think one of our blog was talking about how we build our software in a way to make it possible to build games and small applications that people would want to build on Replit. And he then got in touch with us after he found us on Hacker News. So I would say try to, if there's someone you really want to work with. But by the way, let me just say this first, is that investors will never make your company more successful or make your company successful. They will increase your chances of being successful by opening opportunities, by opening connections, by having sort of a brand name. But ultimately, if you have a startup, it's really on you. Like, if you fail, you failed. If you win, you won. And so you can have all the support and help, but I wouldn't condition my startup on it. Like, I wouldn't say I wouldn't build this unless we get into Y Combinator, right? Because then we're just depending on them, and they're not going to make you successful. So we didn't give up when they rejected us. We still went after other investors, and we got money, and we continued to build it on our vision, and we were relentless in that, and we talked about it. and then we attracted them as opposed to going to them. So they started coming to us. Um, there's a saying, something like, be very good that they can't ignore you, right? So that's what you got to do, is that, maybe at first you're ignored, but you got to be incredibly good, and you got to put in the work and make something successful, whether they'd want to talk to you or not, and then you'll start attracting people.
Perfect. So, Amjad, what advice would you give to Jordanian entrepreneurs who aspire to start their own business and take people?
um I would say start, um start with a vision of the world. Like, start thinking about the world, start thinking about where the world is headed. I had a lot of ideas back in Jordan about what's going to happen to the world. The different shifts in computing. I saw the mobile shift in computing really early when I started using the Symbian phone, and I started putting all my notes on it and started doing a bit of coding on it. I was like, this is gonna be huge. The cloud shift, I saw it early on and was able to position myself and in my career to become a JavaScript expert, because I knew that cloud computing meant browser-based, web-based applications. And so have a vision of the world. It might be wrong and you will correct with time, but for you to build something successful, you have to understand where the world is headed. Because if you think about it, what a startup is building uh, for the future. You're, you know, like like in football, when you pass the ball, you don't pass the ball exactly to where someone is if they're running. You pass it to where they will be, right? And the same thing in startups is that you want to be building for where the future will be, not where today is. Because today is sort of, the market is serviced by the incumbents, but the incumbents will not be able to react to where the future is headed as much as you would as a startup and as an entrepreneur. So think about the future, think about where it's headed, and try to have theories around that. And from there, think about how you want to be part of the future and how you want to invent and invest in the future. So that would be like a big advice. Don't jump from one thing to another very quickly. I think I see it a lot in my friends in Jordan. There's a lot of creativity, but like sticking to something is very important. Like every now and then, someone will get successful on their first try of the idea or in their first month or year, but most of the time it'll take you 5 years to get to some kind of success. So once you have an idea and you have some early validation, try to commit to at least 2 years. Try to say in your mind, I will work on this for 2 years. Um, and then revisit. In 2 years, are you in a much better place than you were 2 years before? If you achieved as much as you'd like to achieve and even more, then you're probably on the right path. Then do that again every 2 years. And that's how we kind of built Replit, actually. Like, uh, I was just reflecting 2 weeks ago about our progress at where we are. And I just looked at our pitch from 2016, what we told investors. And not only we achieved everything that we told investors, but more. And so, and the growth has been very strong as well. So that tells me that we're still on the right path, and maybe and I'll continue to do that. I'll continue um, to think and evaluate and adjust our strategy and things like that. So sticking to something doesn't mean just pure stubbornness. It means being smart about it and doing the right thing.
Perfect. So, as an entrepreneur, what were the biggest challenges that you faced in building your business, and how did you overcome these challenges?
Yeah. Uh, I think the biggest challenge is mostly personal, meaning meaning a lot of what early stage startups is about stamina. It's about working really hard, and um, it's about persevering and surviving. Um, and a lot of it lands on you as a founder and as a CEO. The hardest thing is not to burn out. The hardest thing is to stay healthy. The hardest thing is to get enough sleep, is to eat right, is to keep yourself strong and energetic to achieve your dreams. So I don't think a lot of people talk about this, but I found this to be one of the hardest thing is that I know where we are today, and I really believe where we're headed, and how much we can get done is just a function of my energy and how much energy I can put in. Energy in terms of recruiting people, in terms of doing the work myself, in terms of inspiring my team, in terms of pitching, in terms of raising money. All this is like energy, and I just developed a lot of habits around mindfulness and exercise and eating healthy and all of that to allow me to um, to achieve my dreams. And so I would say understand yourself, um, and figure out how you can make yourself, how you can make yourself scale in a way. And so the biggest challenges has been personal, just being either not in the right mood to do the work, or um, feeling bummed out because something was not going well. You made the wrong hire, someone quit, um, some issue is happening at your startup. Um, a lot of time will put you in a mood that will make you not want to work, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to do in that case. Is you want to work harder to recover from whatever problem you faced. Um, so just figure yourself out. I would say that would be the first challenge, as to how to stay motivated and stay hungry, and just go at it with the most energy you can muster.
So speaking of challenges, how did you overcome the challenges of being an immigrant trying to start a business in a foreign country?
Um, yeah, I would say don't think about it. Just don't think about it. I think a lot of U.S. politics today is about being this identity or being that identity. Oh, I am disadvantaged because I'm an immigrant or whatever. It's like, what's that going to tell you? What's that going to give you? Like, how is that going to help you? Like, maybe it's true that we were disadvantaged as immigrants. Maybe we could have gone into Y Combinator earlier if we were graduates from Stanford. Maybe, we would have, but like, who cares? Well, these questions are not going to help me. If you're social activists, or, someone who's trying to fix some kind of social problems, then maybe asking these questions will help you. But as an entrepreneur, they will not help you. They will stand in your way. They will give you excuses why you're not successful. So instead, ignore them completely and just go about your business to try to achieve your goals. Um, and it goes back to what I said earlier: is be very good that they can't ignore you. That's it.
Thank you for this great answer. The next thing I want to ask you is, working in a corporation, working at Facebook, and being an employee at other companies, what kind of skills and work ethics did you obtain that really influenced you as an entrepreneur?
Um, I think management is incredibly difficult and incredibly um, uh, important. So a lot of startups, especially technology focused startups, just have this idea of like, if I get all these smart people in the same room, we can build anything. And to some extent, it's true. But you realize pretty quickly that you have all this energy, and sometimes it's going in opposite direction. If you think about, say like all the energy of the smart people you got working with you, and management is about aligning everyone to go in the right direction, in the forward direction. And so I think working at Yahoo, I saw some really bad management, bad leadership, and that's a very good experience, learning experience, because now you know what not to do. Working at Facebook, I had two managers. One manager was absolute disaster, and the second manager was really great. And I learned a lot from him, and um, how his approach to management was, and how it made me feel as an employee under his management. I always left our meetings feeling pumped and feeling excited and wanting to achieve more and do more. And I wanted to do that for our company. So I took management very seriously. Not in terms of like um, being a micromanager, telling people what exactly to do, but having consistent one-on-ones with people, and I took leadership very, very seriously as well. Um, I think the management and leadership, it's almost impossible to learn at a startup. And working at a bigger company, this is what you'd learn the most.
So as you're building your company, how do you maintain culture, and how do you manage to motivate your team and keep the environment healthy?
Yeah, we're still kind of figuring this out, and so we're in the process of growing the team, and making sure that's the case. I think the most important thing is being honest about the culture that you're building. And so I see a lot of startups and companies adopting slogans and company values and missions and writing these things down. It's not bad, but a lot of them is artificial and a lot of them sound the same. I would say just live and adopt whatever principles as truly as possible. So if you have a principle or a value, you as a leader need to live that value. So if you have, um, you know, individual contributions and hacker values, you need to be a hacker yourself as the CEO. If you care about speed and execution, you need to be really good at that. If you care about being organized, you need to be the most organized person in the company. And so whatever value you care about and you want to develop, you have to develop it in yourself first, and you have to be honest about it, and you have to not give it up, and you have to stay focused on doing it. Um, Now, on remote is brings a lot more challenges to culture building, because in an office you see how people interact and how people talk and how they carry themselves, and that in itself kind of creates a lot of culture, and shared context and values. I think when going remote, especially now with a pandemic, the way we found that we're adopting the correct culture is, or the right culture and mindset is, making sure we're awarding and calling out people who are doing the right thing and the good thing, and always tying back to our values and what we care about and how we care about it. And so anytime we're talking and we're saying like this person, we give someone a shout out, we're always tying it back to how well they've done with, with regards to one of our values or culture ideas. Another thing is hiring. You always have to make sure whomever you're hiring for actually has the right mindset and could be a culture fit. So it's important to really take that seriously and hire slowly and carefully. And firing is important as well. So you have to let go of people who are not being a fit. And in some cases, especially in culture, they detract and they might make things worse. And so you have to also be very strict about that.
Well said. In terms of fundraising, how do you choose the right investors to be part of your startup journey? And what advice would you be giving to entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I've approached it as like who are the people that I respect the most, and I really like their thinking and how they view the world. And I've sort of went and tried to attract these people. Um, I think there are also some strategic investors that you might want to take on. So an investor that is knowledgeable and has a lot of connection in a certain space that you're going after. So when we were going after education, we took money from Reach Capital, for example, who are a education investor, and they have a lot of connection in that space. And so I guess two things. One is, who do you want to work with? Do you really like these people? And two, who do they have expertise in the area you're going after?
So our last question for today is, with the exponential growth for open source, what happens to IP software in the future?
I think it's open source in a way is actually seeing its limits now. It's there's a lot of take a somewhat of a recent example. So there was this huge bug called Heartbleed, which was a bug in OpenSSL. OpenSSL is the encryption software for web traffic that was open source, and that was maintained by one person, and it was used by everyone. Virtually everyone on the internet used that software, and it had a bug that I was very kind of simple, which is like it was missing the braces around an F statement. And so one statement they thought that was part of the F statement, it was actually after it. So it was executing all the time. And that caused a huge issue. And when people started looking at it, they found that there are a lot of open source software today that is not maintained very well. There's a lot of people starting software and they get to a point that it's kind of good, but at some point it needs funding and needs focus to make sure it's maintainable and it's well. Now there are projects that kind of achieved escape velocity, like Linux, where you have Microsoft, Facebook, Google, all these companies are contributing to Linux and paying people to contribute to Linux. But a lot of the long tail of open source software is kind of struggling with maintainability. GitHub's trying to solve this problem, but I would say there's no threat on non-open source software anytime soon. I think you can still build a lot of businesses.
Perfect. Amjad, it was an absolute pleasure having you today. Thank you very much for this insightful session. You're quite an inspiration for a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, especially in Jordan. It was an absolute pleasure having you and hosting you today. Hopefully we can have you attend our innovation hub physically and have a future webinar in the future. And yeah, I would like to also thank everybody who attended. Please stay tuned for future sessions. Thank you again, Amjad. And
My pleasure.
I hope
I
you have
really
a great
appreciate
day
it.
and best of luck.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for this opportunity. And anyone who wants who has any more questions, feel free to reach out to me directly.
Thank you, Amjad.